It was Christmas Day, a time for peace and family. But that peaceful day changed fast. President Donald Trump, the leader of the United States, made a sudden and important announcement. He used social media to tell the world about big news. The U.S. military had just launched powerful and deadly airstrikes. These attacks happened in Nigeria, a country in West Africa. This news caused many questions. Why did the U.S. attack Nigeria? And why did it happen on Christmas Day, a day often seen as a time of goodwill? The target was clear: ISIS militants, a dangerous group in West Africa. President Trump said the attacks were a mission to help Christians in Nigeria who were suffering greatly. He wanted to save them from harm. But even with this explanation, many people felt that the situation was more complex. It was not a simple story of good versus bad. The world watched, trying to understand this strong action. To truly know why American bombs were falling on Nigerian soil, we must first learn about the long history of problems and violence that made the region so unstable. The chaos had been building for many years, turning Nigeria into a dangerous place, ready to explode. 2. A land of many problems. Nigeria, a large country in Africa with over 200 million people, has faced severe violence for more than 10 years. This crisis comes from many armed groups, making it one of the world's biggest problems. The violence is complex, not a single issue.
A main threat is Boko Haram, which started in 2009. They seek strict Islamic law and reject Western ideas. Boko Haram has killed tens of thousands and displaced over 2 million people. ISWAP, a strong group that split from Boko Haram in 2015, also causes much trouble. Their power highlights weaknesses in Nigeria's army. Beyond these, criminal bandits operate in the northwest, like Sokoto State. These groups kidnap and steal, blurring the lines between crime and extremist violence. In Nigeria's Middle Belt, farmers and herders often clash. They fight over land and water, made worse by climate change. This conflict has also killed thousands and forced many from their homes. Some believe Christians are disproportionately affected in certain areas. Human rights groups report 50,000 to 56,000 deaths from violence, with Christians often making up a larger share of victims in some regions. However, many experts and the Nigerian government argue the situation is not a simple religious war. They note that many Muslims are also victims, especially in the Northeast. The government suggests the violence stems from weak state security and other problems, not only religion. This makes the true conflict difficult to understand. Nigeria's military already struggles with these multiple crises. So, how did the United States, the world's most powerful nation, turn its attention here?
What warnings were given before any strike was approved? 3. The warning signs. The United States did not act without warning. For many months, President Donald Trump's government spoke more and more strongly about the difficult situation in Nigeria. The administration believed that Christians in Nigeria faced a very big danger. President Trump called this danger an existential threat. This meant that the threat was so severe it could end Christianity in the country entirely. These clear statements began to build tension, showing that the U.S. was ready to take action. In October, President Trump made his feelings very clear to the world. He said that radical Islamist groups were causing a terrible mass slaughter of people. Because of this, Nigeria was officially named a Country of Particular Concern, CPC, for religious freedom. This important label showed America's deep worry
and allowed for possible actions in the future. Soon after this, the U.S. government also put limits on visas for some Nigerian officials. It said these officials were involved in the violence affecting the country. President Trump often talked about his promise to protect Christian communities around the world. He stated firmly that the United States would not simply watch while such terrible events continued. He warned loudly, "We stand ready, willing, and able to save our great Christian population around the world." Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also used very strong language.
He told Nigeria that the U.S. was ready, willing, and able to act if the violence did not stop. These were not just words. By the end of November, U.S. military planes began flying over Nigeria. These flights were to collect important information, showing that military action was now a very real possibility. In early November, President Trump publicly said he would not rule out military operations in Nigeria to protect Christians. At the president's command, the Pentagon, which is America's military main office, started making plans for different types of military actions. These plans ranged from small steps to very large interventions. The U.S. government's message was unmistakable. If the attacks on Christians did not stop, there would be a huge price to pay. President Trump had warned there would be hell to pay. The world watched closely, waiting to see how and when the United States would keep its powerful promise. No one knew the exact timing or the method, but the feeling of coming action was strong. This tension grew until the day that bombs finally fell on Christmas. 4. Bombs on Christmas Day. On Christmas Day, the United States military launched airstrikes in Nigeria. President Donald Trump announced the news on social media, calling them powerful and deadly attacks. He stated that the U.S. had targeted ISIS militants, specifically the Islamic State West Africa Province, ISAWP, in Sokoto State. Trump proudly declared that the Department of Defense executed numerous perfect strikes, adding that only the United States is capable of doing such. He claimed these operations killed multiple ISIS terrorists. This action fulfilled his earlier warnings that if the slaughtering of Christians did not stop, there would be hell to pay. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth later posted online, hinting that more to come was planned. U.S. Africa Command, known as AFRICOM, confirmed the military action. They stated the strikes took place in Sokoto State, aimed at Islamic State militants. AFRICOM also emphasized that Nigeria had requested these strikes, and they were conducted with the Nigerian authorities' support and cooperation. However, there was little clear information about the operation. The U.S. government did not explain how the strikes were carried out. They did not specify if planes, drones, or missiles were used. The exact places in Sokoto State that were hit were also not revealed. This lack of transparency made it hard for people to understand the real success, precision, or possible effects on civilians. In contrast to President Trump's strong and triumphant statements, the Nigerian government's reaction was quite quiet. Nigeria's foreign ministry confirmed the precise strikes on terrorist targets. Yet their statement also stressed that terrorism directed at any religious community in Nigeria contradicts the nation's values. This carefully chosen language seemed to show that Nigeria did not fully agree with the U.S. view that the violence was only against Christians. The U.S. presented the strikes as a clear victory.
But Nigeria's subtle response left many wondering about the true nature of their request for American help. What deeper understanding did Nigeria have that the rest of the world did not know? 5. Why is this happening? Many people ask why there is so much fighting in Nigeria. There are two main ideas about this problem. These ideas help us understand why the U.S. chose to act. One idea, strongly supported by President Donald Trump, says that Christians in Nigeria face a great danger. President Trump himself called it an existential threat to Christianity. This view states that groups like ISIS militants in West Africa are attacking Christians on purpose. Evidence shows that Boko Haram, a terrorist group, has bombed churches. They have also taken many Christians by force and killed them. In states like Borno and Yobe, Christianity has been largely pushed out, with many Christians forced to leave or die. News reports also highlight that Christian farmers often face attacks from armed groups known as Fulani pastoralists in Nigeria's Middle Belt. They argue that these attacks seem to specifically target Christian communities. The second idea suggests the violence is much more complicated. It's not only about religion.
Many people, including the Nigerian government and security experts, say that most victims of the fighting are actually Muslim. They explain that terrorist groups like Boko Haram and ISIS militants kill people of all faiths, including many Muslims, especially in the northern areas where these groups are strong. This view points to several other reasons for the violence. The Nigerian government struggles to control security across its large country. This state failure means there are not enough police or soldiers to keep peace everywhere. Also, fierce fighting happens over natural resources like land and water. In the Middle Belt, in areas like Plateau, Benue, and Kaduna states, farmers and herders, sometimes from different religions, clash over grazing lands and water sources. Climate change makes this problem worse as water becomes harder to find. Criminal gangs also add to the violence, kidnapping people for money and stealing. So religion is just one part of a bigger problem that includes poor governance, lack of resources, and widespread crime, all connected in a complex way. Between 50 and 56,000 people have died in this violence over recent years, and while Christians are often victims in some areas, Muslims are also greatly affected. These two ideas are very different. How one understands the problem changes how they think it should be fixed.
If the United States acted based on a simple idea about the conflict, was its intervention a good way to protect people? Or did it make things worse, like adding fuel to a fire that was already burning? 6. A dangerous game. The American bombs in Nigeria were not only about stopping terror groups, they also sent a big message to the whole world. After the strikes, people started to talk about the deeper meanings of this action. It was clear that these bombs changed more than just the battlefield. A main point of discussion was about Nigeria's right to control its own country. The United States government said Nigeria asked them for help, but many asked if this was a true invitation, or perhaps Nigeria felt pressured to accept the help. The government of Nigeria gave a very quiet response to the U.S. strikes. Their words were chosen carefully and did not sound like a full celebration. This made people think that Nigeria might not have fully agreed with the way things happened. It seemed Nigeria wanted to show it was still in charge of its land and its decisions. This situation raised questions about national sovereignty. These strikes by the U.S. also looked like a part of a larger contest between big countries. Africa is very important because of its resources and its people. Other big powers, like China and Russia, have been trying to get more influence in Africa. President Donald Trump's government seemed to use this opportunity to show America's strong position.
It was almost like a new, quiet, great game being played for power on the African continent. Was the U.S. only trying to save lives, as President Donald Trump stated, or was it also trying to prove its dominance in the region? This was a difficult question for many to answer. The U.S. had recently faced problems in West Africa. For example, it had to leave its military base in Niger in 2024. This was because some people in that region were growing to dislike the American military being there. So when the U.S. bombed Nigeria, it was a very bold move. It clearly showed America's power. But this strong action could have unexpected consequences. Could this push some of America's friends in Africa away? Could they choose to work more with China or Russia instead? The future of relationships in Africa became very uncertain. This dangerous game of global power had just entered a new stage. The real cost. The airstrikes on Nigeria may not solve the problem for good. History shows that bombing campaigns often do not fully stop extremist groups. For example, in Somalia, the United States military carried out many airstrikes for years, yet these groups are still active and strong today. The same pattern was seen in Yemen, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Many bombs were dropped, but terrorist organizations were not completely defeated. At best, these operations only made their actions harder for a limited time. Fighting in Nigeria also brings big logistical problems for the U.S. The United States does not have many military bases close to Nigeria. Nigeria is a very large country, about the size of California, Nevada, and Utah combined. To keep flying planes and drones for a long time, the U.S. would need new agreements with the Nigerian government for bases or support. This kind of arrangement is not easy to get. Also, to know where to strike, the U.S. needs very good real-time information about where the extremist fighters are. Getting this constant intelligence needs a lot of American resources and strong cooperation from Nigeria. Another important question is about the real cost of these strikes, especially to human lives. U.S. officials said the strikes were perfect and killed many terrorists, but there is no independent proof of these claims. Information about potential civilian casualties, meaning ordinary people not involved in fighting, remains unknown. Without this, it is very hard to know if the strikes followed international rules about protecting innocent lives. The human cost of war can be very high and affect communities for years. Furthermore, military action alone might not fix the deep root problems that cause extremism. People might join these groups because of a lack of jobs, poor government services, unfair treatment, or arguments over land. If these underlying issues are not fixed, simply bombing groups might not stop new fighters from joining. In fact, it could even make more people angry and push them towards extremist ideas, creating a cycle of violence. The administration stated that more is to come, signaling that these strikes are only the beginning of a larger effort. This makes people wonder deeply about the future. Will this new chapter of American military engagement lead to peace and stability for Nigeria? Or will it instead create new extremist fighters and plunge the country into an even deadlier, more complex conflict? 8. An uncertain future. The Christmas strikes by the United States military in Nigeria were a big event. President Donald Trump said they were needed to protect Christians from ISIS militants. But this action has created many complex questions. Nigeria faces deep problems, not just from one group. There are many fighters, arguments over land and water, and weak government control. Experts disagree if the main problem is religion or other issues. This makes understanding the conflict very difficult. Was the U.S. intervention a good way to help? Some people wonder if using military power will truly solve Nigeria's long-standing problems. History shows that bombing campaigns do not always stop extremist groups completely. The strikes raise questions about the wisdom of this military strategy. Also, the true human cost, especially regarding civilian lives, is still not clear. We do not have all the details about the perfect strikes.
Beyond Nigeria, these strikes also change how the United States acts in Africa. Countries like China and Russia are also working to increase their influence there. So the U.S. decision is also a move in this larger global game. It mixes humanitarian goals with national interests. This makes the future direction of U.S. foreign policy very uncertain. In conclusion, the Christmas strikes did not offer easy solutions. Instead, they highlighted the difficult choices involved when a country tries to use its power to help others. This event makes everyone think about the balance between helping people, using military strength, and a country's own goals. The path ahead for Nigeria and for America's role in the world is still very unclear. What do you think will be the long-term effects of these U.S. strikes on peace and stability in Nigeria?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.